I'm 90 now, and time has a way of quietly rearranging what you thought you understood. For 45 years, I showed up early, stayed late, and believed I was building a life that would feel solid when I finally slowed down. I still remember the night I cleared my desk for the last time and sat in the car longer than I needed to. The truth is, the security I chased kept me so busy that I never noticed what it was quietly taking in return. If you give me a few minutes, I want to share what those decades actually taught me and what I wish I had understood much sooner. The first thing I want to say is that I wasn't a careless man. I paid attention. I planned ahead. I thought carefully about what my family needed, what my employer expected, what the future might ask of me. For most of my working life, I believed that kind of attention was the same thing as wisdom. It wasn't. There's a difference between being careful and being present. And it took me until my late 60s to begin understanding what that difference actually costs a person. I spent most of my 40s focused on a promotion that I genuinely believed would change things. Not just financially, though that mattered, but in some quieter way I couldn't quite name. I thought reaching that level would let me breathe easier. And when I got it, I did breathe easier for about 3 weeks. Then the next set of pressures arrived, and I leaned forward again, and the breathing never quite came back the way I expected. That's the first thing those years taught me. Security has a way of moving. You chase it, you reach it, and it repositions itself just ahead of you. Not because anyone is deceiving you, but because that's how ambition works when it isn't paired with something steadier underneath. My wife used to say I was always slightly somewhere else, not absent in a dramatic way. I was home for dinners. I came to school plays. But she could tell, and she told me once plainly without anger, that even when I was in the room, part of me was still at the office, sorting through whatever hadn't been resolved yet. I didn't argue with her. I didn't really know how to fix it either. I think a lot of people who work hard recognize that feeling without having a name for it. You're physically present but mentally carrying something. And over years, that habit of carrying things home becomes invisible to you. You stop noticing it because it becomes normal. That's when it starts doing the most damage. The second thing I came to understand is that the skills that make you valuable at work are often the same ones that quietly create distance in everything else. I was good at problem solving. I was good at staying composed under pressure. I was good at keeping emotions out of decisions. Those things served me well in a conference room. At home, with my children, with my own interior life, they were sometimes the wrong tools entirely. My son and I went years without a real conversation. Not because of any single argument or falling out, just because I treated our relationship the way I treated a project. I checked in, I made sure things were functioning, and I moved on. What he needed, what most people need from the people close to them, isn't a check-in. It's to feel like they have your full attention on a Tuesday afternoon when nothing particular is happening. I learned that too late with him. We repaired things eventually, but repair is slower than prevention, and you can't fully undo the years that passed without that kind of ease between you. Here's something I didn't expect to discover. When I finally retired, I didn't feel free the way I had imagined. I felt slightly unmoored. I had built an identity so thoroughly around my role, around being the person who handled things and showed up early and solved problems, that when the structure fell away, I didn't know what was left. That disorientation lasted longer than I would have predicted. I had never asked myself in any serious way what I actually valued when no one was measuring me. That question sounds simple. It is not simple. Most people who work long careers inside demanding systems never get a real opportunity to sit with that question. The days are too full. Somewhere around my early 70s, I started writing things down. Not formally, not in any journal I ever intended for anyone else to read, just observations, things I had noticed, things I regretted, things I was finally seeing clearly enough to put into words. That practice became more valuable to me than most of what I had learned inside a boardroom. What came out of it surprised me. The losses weren't dramatic. There was no single catastrophic mistake I could point to. It was quieter than that. It was accumulation, a pattern of small trades made over decades, each one reasonable in the moment, that added up to something I hadn't agreed to when I started. That pattern is what I want to talk about, because I don't think I was unique in it. I think it's the kind of thing that happens to careful, well-intentioned people without them ever quite choosing it. And there's a way through it, or at least a way of seeing it clearly enough that the next generation of choices can be different. The pattern I mentioned, those small trades, they don't feel like trades when you're making them. That's the part that's hardest to explain to someone who's still in the middle of it. When you choose to take a work call during a Saturday morning, it doesn't feel like a choice against anything. It just feels like handling something reasonable, responsible, and it is in isolation. The problem is that a life isn't lived in isolation. It's lived in accumulation. I missed a lot of Saturday mornings. Not everyone, but enough that my children stopped expecting me to be fully available on them. And when a child stops expecting something from you, they don't make a scene about it. They just quietly reorganize what they rely on you for. That reorganization is nearly invisible when it happens. You only see it clearly from the other side. There's something about the way work rewards you that makes it very easy to justify more of it. You get recognition, you get advancement, you get the feeling, and it is a genuine feeling, that your effort matters. Home life doesn't offer that kind of immediate feedback. The people who love you don't hand you a performance review. The value of being present doesn't show up on anything measurable until years later, and by then the connection is either deep or it isn't. I had a colleague, a man I worked alongside for nearly 2 decades. Sharp, driven, genuinely good at what he did. He retired about 3 years before I did, and I ran into him sometime after that at a coffee shop near where we both lived. I expected to find him content. He had the pension, the house was paid off, the credentials were all there. Instead, he seemed smaller somehow, not physically, just in his bearing. We talked for a while, and he said something I have thought about many times since. He said the hardest thing about stopping work wasn't the loss of income or structure. It was realizing he had spent 30 years becoming very good at something he was only moderately interested in, because it paid well, and because he was too far in to change direction. That hit me harder than I let on at the time, because I recognized it. Not completely. I wasn't without genuine interest in my field. But there was a version of myself in my late 20s who had other inclinations, quieter ones, and I had talked myself out of them practically, sensibly. And for most of my career, I never thought much about it until I stopped and the quiet came, and those old inclinations were still there, patient and untouched, like furniture covered with a sheet. I want to be careful here because I don't want to give the impression that ambition or career or financial security are wrong things to pursue. They aren't. What I'm pointing at is something more specific. It's the difference between building a life around your work and building work into a life. The order matters. The placement matters. Most of us were taught to get the career right and assume the rest would follow. I think that sequencing is where a lot of the difficulty comes from. One thing I've come to believe is that the people who seem most settled in old age, and I've had the chance to know a few of them well, are not the ones who achieve the most. They tend to be the ones who stayed closest to what they actually were. Their choices over the decades, even the modest ones, tracked something genuine in them. They didn't perform a version of themselves into existence. They just lived closer to the surface of who they were. That sounds simple. It's not. Staying close to what you actually are requires a certain quiet courage that no one really prepares you for, because the pressure to be useful, to be practical, to be what circumstances need you to be, that pressure is constant, and it comes from people who mean well. At 90, the thing I value most isn't what I accumulated or what I accomplished, though I'm not dismissing those things. What I value most is the handful of relationships that are still genuinely warm, the conversations that have real weight to them, the people who know me without needing to be reminded. Those didn't happen because I was successful. They happened in spite of how much time I gave to being successful. They happened because somewhere in the middle of all of it, I managed to show up, really show up, often enough that something held. I don't know what the arithmetic of a life is supposed to look like. I'm not sure anyone does. But sitting here now, 90 years old and mostly unrushed, I think the question worth asking, earlier than I asked it, is not what you want to achieve. It's who you want to still be standing beside when the achieving is finished. That question changes what you do on a Tuesday afternoon. And Tuesday afternoons, it turns out, are most of a life. If there's anything worth carrying forward from all of this, it's that a life is shaped more by ordinary afternoons than by major milestones. You don't notice the meaning of small moments while they're happening, but they quietly decide what remains when the noise fades. Work will always ask for more. That is its nature. The real question is whether you leave enough of yourself elsewhere for the people and parts of life that do not ask so loudly. And if there is still time ahead, I hope it's spent a little closer to what matters most.